Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. As always, at this time of day, I am joined with my colleague and friend, Dave Russell. Good morning, my friend.
Hey, good morning, Jason. How are you?
I am richly blessed, thanks. This is our normal live stream, but we're going to interrupt this because this is live. We're going to interrupt this with some breaking news. Like 30 minutes ago, we just got notification. So CRN just announced two new awards for Veeam. One in the disaster recovery category around the Veeam Availability Suite version 10. That's awesome. We could just do a round of applause. We need like a pre-recorded hand clap for that. And then Veeam Backup for Office 365 also won in the data security category, which I got to admit, I'm really excited for that one because it recognizes the fact that built-in Recycle Bin is not enough.
Yes.
That customers and, since it's CRN, partners understand how important it is to complement for that. So that's our breaking news for live. This week's topic, well, actually, before we get to that, this week's topic is going to be around to renew or not renew. And so we have the expert in renewals at Veeam and customer satisfaction with us today. But let's find out before we interview Jim, let's find out where y'all are from. So please, in the LinkedIn chat, tell us where you're from. Tell us about what countries. The great state of Texas is in the house. That's my little piece of heaven. Colorado is already on the map. Let's see what we got here. So a little bit of Eastern Europe, Florida. Who could possibly be dialing in from Florida this time of day? Oh, wait, it's Jim. So with us today is Jim Tedesco. And I hope we get this right. Senior Vice President, Renewals, Customer Stat, and just all around Veeam historian. Is that a good way to start it out?
Yeah, I think in terms of being a veteran, I'm probably the veteran of the three of us here.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Jim, welcome to the show. So every week we try to spend about 15 minutes or so just talking about the industry trends overall and how that matters for our customers and for our partners, and then kind of get a little bit nerdy, but maybe start us off with, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, yeah, listen. So with Veeam, 6 years. So I've done everything from running the Americas sales to now worldwide renewals and customer success. Prior to that, I worked for two large software companies, both of which were public, both of which were plus $1 billion. And I ran channels, I ran worldwide sales, I ran different business units for those companies. And I will say that this is my 25th year in the business, so I'm pretty well schooled on how there's been this change from perpetual licensing to subscription, and how you have licensing based on the performance of the server versus the workload, and all sorts of different ways to analyze license types. But the fact remains, Veeam as a vendor is the leader in the marketplace, and I could say that because we've got the best technical support in the industry. I could go into details on that and prove that to you. But we also have probably one of the highest retention rates in the industry. So really, really pleased with what the customers, basically voting with their checkbook, are saying about Veeam.
So, Jim, we cite now, as of, I think, literally just 1, possibly 2 weeks ago, that Veeam has 400,000 customers globally, north of 180 countries. I think we're like 183 or something countries. So anyway, big numbers, right? I mean, fantastically diverse numbers in terms of the huge amount, the locations, as we'll see when we keep coming back to the world map. But from a renewals perspective, I don't know if I'm airing things that I shouldn't, like don't talk about what goes on in the kitchen, just come out smiling and serve it on to the customers. But we should point out to everyone, Jim actually hosts his own activity called Ask the Coach. It's internal within Veeam. But you recently, Jim, were interviewing the person that's involved every single quarter for completing renewals, and it's like some fantastic number in a short period of time that actually gets transacted. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been doing the renewals business now. This is my fourth complete year as we end up here in the next 2 months. And I will tell you that we started out doing about 2,000 renewal transactions per month. Right now, we're averaging about 13,000 transactions, and we've got for December, we've got slated 20,000 as our high watermark. So as you can imagine, with our licensing team who actually go out there and license the software to our customers, we're staffing up like crazy just to get ready for the end of the year here. But it's not just the number, and I think the important thing is it's what's the percentage. And when I look at a kind of like a Gantt chart of our customers and their decisions as to why renew and when to renew and if they renew. I see that we're not losing to the competition. In other words, a customer is not saying, hey, I'm not going to renew with you because I'm going to those guys. That doesn't happen very rarely. And in those cases, I could probably count on one hand. And those are because they were acquired and the other company that did the acquiring owned the other technology. But other than that, no one has raised their hand and said, hey, I'm leaving Veeam to go there. And again, thousands and thousands of transactions. I think we're up to 100, almost 100,000 transactions so far this year, right? So that's one. The other thing is, of the customers who say, I'm not going to renew, and it's a very small number, those customers are saying, hey, the product works. I mean, the product is fantastic, and I don't need the technical support because I haven't called tech support. I haven't called them all year. So you know what? I'm not going to renew, and I understand there's a reinstatement penalty. Like if I let it lapse, I'll pay the penalty if I need it, but I've got a close-knit budget here, so I'm not going to. So those, my biggest competition is my product is so good that no one, a large portion of my customers are saying that I don't need the support because I need to call you. It just works. So that's pretty funny when you think about it. But on the other side of it, the retention rate is in the high 90% range. So customers are retaining our software at a very, very high percentage rate.
That is so consistent with what we're seeing on the hardware side of the business. Dave and I talked just a few weeks ago, and customers saying that they're trying to keep their hardware longer, especially in this COVID world, just to kind of keep the lights on. They're not making those investments, and if stuff is working, how can I just stretch that latitude out of that?
But I will tell you though, those customers who decide not to renew because they're gonna kind of roll the dice, we do send them a communication that says to them, hey, look, in a production environment. With these times, with people working remotely and a lot of different concessions you're making in your business, the one thing you probably don't want to gamble on is your data infrastructure. And so we strongly suggest to those customers, rethink that and come back. And we have this whole campaign around we want you back. And we're winning a large portion of those back, just only because of the last couple of months have been so uncertain for businesses. But again, it's not competition. It's the product is really, really good. And then the other thing we're seeing in the marketplace, which is interesting, and Dave, I know you and I talked before the show about the consolidation of companies wanting to move to a universal license type. When I look at perpetual licenses, so these customers own perpetual licenses based on sockets. So in other words, the size of their server base and the processing of their servers. And they're moving very quickly to migrating those licenses over to the universal licensing. Why? Better flexibility, gives them the ability to access and deploy workloads directly into the cloud and pull them down off the cloud. Lots of V10 capabilities. You guys can go into the details and tell customers about those. But the bottom line is customers are starting to say, hey, look, I'm locked into these sockets, but VMs and the way I run my business based on workloads is a more flexible option for me. And I'd rather go into that subscription model. So migrate from the perpetual into a subscription model gives me a lot more flexibility in how I deploy my licenses, how I deploy my workloads. But I also pay in this different type of model. I pay annually, so I could increase my total need, decrease my total need as I need it on an annual basis. Whereas in a socket-based license, I'm locked into the number of sockets in this perpetual license. So let me get off of that. Let me get into the universal licenses. Let me get into a subscription-based payment plan. I'll go into an OpEx model in my accounting. So most customers I talk to are challenged with a CapEx and an OpEx. They want to go into an OpEx model, and the universal licensing is much more friendly in that capacity. So we're seeing a large migration, if you will.
I licensing is one of those things that like nobody really wants to talk about it, but when it's a problem, everybody talks about it. And what I mean, by that, Jason, well, I'm sure that there's problems when you're an administrator and you can't get the licenses you need for the workloads that you're being asked to protect. There's real friction there. And we've lived through a lot of years of different licensing changes. Licensing changes themselves can be somewhat traumatic for some, but one of the things I like a lot about universal license is what you said, Jim. You can actually have portability because we're moving workloads around.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I mean, what do you get when you renew? And this I keep on reinforcing. It's kind of like my mantra. My mantra is there's three things you get when you renew with Veeam. First is the tech support. Everybody knows that when you buy a renewal, you get technical support, and you could upgrade that technical support to 24/7, 365. Otherwise, it's standard support, and standard support means it's 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in your local time zone. So we've got tech support personnel around the globe. So in the United States, you have folks out of Columbus, Ohio, that basically support the North American, South American markets, multiple languages. We've got Prague, we've got Sydney, Australia. So we basically follow the map, and as one team is going to sleep, another team is waking up, and we kind of push those customers over. But the thing you got to realize is the technical support is the heart and soul of buying tech support or buying a maintenance renewal. Now, the second thing is the licensing portal. You have access to your own customer portal, and you can move your licenses. Let's say you're on a subscription model, and you've got certain workloads and certain different VMs around your environment. You could assign your administrators to those workloads, and now those workloads belong to that administrator. So when they call tech support, they know exactly what they have licensed, and they know exactly what those workloads are intended to do. And tech support becomes so much more proactive in that mode. So you have access to that portal, and you can manipulate and redeploy those licenses and workloads as you wish. And then the third thing is probably, I think, the most important thing is hot fixes, temporary fixes, patches, updates, and new releases are all free. And so when you don't buy your maintenance renewal contract, you're basically locked into that older version. Now, as you know, every infrastructure changes. Most companies redeploy their hardware and refresh their infrastructure, their operating systems, probably twice a year. And so by having access to the hot fixes, the patches, new releases, gives you so much more flexibility. And having that expert on the other side of the phone who could walk you through it and provide that concierge service as, hey, look, maybe the backup's not working, but it's not really a software problem as it relates to Veeam. It's really an environmental issue, and let me show you where that is and how you could allocate more storage space, for example, or better resources towards your storage. And let me get on the phone with you to your hardware vendor, and let's make sure we get this solved today. And so we provide that service as part of tech support, something that most companies don't even do. And the other thing I'll mention about tech support, while I'm putting the plug for them, we don't have an operator who answers the phone, takes your name, and then someone calls you back when they're ready. Basically, our on-hold time is about a minute, anywhere in the world, a minute. And when the person answers the phone, that person is your level 1 tech support rep. And 80% of the time, that person solves your issue right there. So you're not called back, you're not online in the queue. Basically, I answer the phone as if I'm Jim Tedesco from Veeam Software, from technical support. I'm here to help you. What is the problem? Explain to me what your issues are. Maybe I ask you for a log report. Maybe I do some research, but I'm the one who's interfacing with you. And 80% of the time, I'm the person who solves that issue. I think it's 83% of the time, I'm the person who solves that for you. And more than half the time, it happens on that first phone call. I mean, it's amazing. So most vendors don't do that. And we're really, really providing what we call bleeding edge service and support. Jason, I see you smiling there. I think you love that. I don't know if you heard that stat before.
Yeah, no, I'd heard the stats before, but so here's the problem. So a vast majority of our customers, the product just works, and so maybe they think they don't need the to do the maintenance because it just works. And then for those customers that have a blip, they make one phone call and they're solved before the end of the phone call. I mean, we really got to make the product harder. I mean, right? Because otherwise they're just not getting enough value out of tech support. But hey, I want to double back though on the licensing thing, because I got to tell you, when you started describing that concept of redeploying, when I first heard about universal licensing, I was very uncomfortable. All right, because you said you've been in licensing for 25 years. Dave and I have been in data protection specifically for 30 years each. And I remember that, licensing always came with a big Excel spreadsheet. And there were two Excel spreadsheets, one that came from the vendor, with every single SKU that you would need for your SQL agents and your Oracle agents and your SharePoint agents and your NAS agents and capacity licensing and all these licenses. And then after your production environment migrated, you kept a second spreadsheet of the licenses that were no longer active. You bought them, but they have since been outgrown or deployed. And so then you had to wait for someone else in the company that needed to protect that workload before they could reuse that license, because it had become shelfware until it was used again. So I got to tell you, that whole concept of just being able to redeploy flexibly just made me really uncomfortable, because I'm going to miss those two spreadsheets.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. But for everybody who's listening, what Jason's talking about is you count up the number of VMs in your environment. Basically, there's a one-to-one relationship with universal licenses. That's how many you need based on the VMs, and maybe you have some physical environments. Maybe there's a couple extras we add, right? But ultimately, you add up, let's say 1,000 Vol VM universal licenses. You have 1,000. You can deploy them any way you want. There's no spreadsheets. There's no requirement to figure out what you had, what you migrated to. It's a universal license can be used on any workload, any VM, any server, any agent, any capability. So it's almost like plugging in electricity.
I'm telling you, man, you got to make it more complicated. Hey, let's talk about Universal for a second. Let's look at Universal on the map. So we've got, we're 10 plus countries so far. What do we got? Romania, always in the house. Belarus, Missouri, going to be spending some time there over the summer. Stamford, Connecticut is in. France, Greece, Zambia. Been a while since Zambia's been on the call. Thanks for dialing in for that. Switzerland. I used to say best chocolate anywhere. Still pretty much hold to that. New Jersey's in the house. Miami, Florida, Costa Rica, and Germany. I love this list, but I got to tell you, Dave, some of our favorites, like my friends down in South Africa, they haven't chimed in yet. Brazil, typically we can count on them in the first 10 minutes. So I don't know. We seem to be underperforming. So please keep piling on.
Well, it's certainly not the presenter, right? I mean, you can't blame it on the presenter.
That's right.
Jason,
when you were mentioning the licensing, back before I joined Veeam, I used to do bid reviews in a past life. And the Veeam bid review was really easy. It was 2 lines. It was back then how many sockets. Nowadays it would be how many instances, and then whatever your support was, like if it's a 1 year, a 3-year deal. By contrast, many of the other vendors, literally I would go through pages, and it became an Easter egg hunt. Now, to be fair, in some cases, those pages, maybe it was a vendor that also sold hardware, so you had other kit in there. But the Easter egg hunt was, okay, are you getting the appropriate percentage discount here and there? And was there some surprise like, oh, I got a good deal here, but it's like buying a car, right? It's, oh, the engine's free, but the tires are going to cost you. And so you had to look for these little surprises. So while we generally, don't like to think about licensing, I always use the phrase, you don't think about it until you have to think about it. One of the nice things, in addition to the portability of the license and reflection of the portability of the workloads, is just the transparency. As an admin, it's really no fun if you're being asked to back up 20,000 SQL Server instances, and yet you don't know if you have the budget for it or not.
Yeah, that's true. You're supposed to be asking me questions, but if you don't mind, there's a plug I wanted to put in. If you could go to the Veeam customer lifecycle slide that I gave you guys, I want to discuss this with the customers that are on. And this is really important, because what makes us different than other vendors you might be dealing with, and why do we have such a strong affinity with our customers? Why do we have such a high NPS score? Well, we add about, I want to say, 5,000 customers a month. I mean, we're well over 50,000 customers a year. So 5 times 12 is, right about 50, right around 60, maybe, right around 50 or 60, right? So what happens when you buy a Veeam software? Well, if you look at the bottom of this chart to the left there, you see new customer, and you see this, what we call onboarding. And that onboarding is something that's special to Veeam. We use our reseller channel, our partners, to help our customers get on board, use the software, have it implemented correctly, feel as though they're getting value out of it. Once they start adopting some of the functionality, and we have check-ins with them after 2 months, 3 months, up to 6 months, really ensuring that there's a true return on the investment. And that's something that's done electronically. as well as phone calls from our staff. And I've got what we call our customer success team. Customer success team now hits these milestones with the customer to try and ensure that they're successful with our software. And then there's this what we call retention. As I said before, we have a retention rate, high 90 percentile. Most customers renew. Those customers that aren't renewing, the large portion of them are not renewing because they seem as though they're doing fine and the product is just working. We kind of talk them out of that, obviously, locally and worldwide with the pandemic. There's other reasons why you want to have support and have a really, really smart guy on the end of the phone. And then the renewal activity starts, and that's where my team, my renewals team, interacts with customers to give them options around long-term commitments, better value in terms of discounts around those long-term commitments. Also, the migrations from one license type to the other type, as well as the hand-holding around looking at other capabilities within our portfolio. So whether it be additional sockets or additional instances around their license type, but more importantly, we just won an award today around Office 365 and getting customers introduced to that technology. If they started with backup and replication, now they're looking at Office and now backing up their Office 365 environment. So that kind of gives you an idea of that life cycle that we monitor very closely. Again, customer surveys really showing the customer satisfaction. The NPS score continues to grow, probably double our nearest competitors. And it's a continuous relationship. And most companies who deal with a third-party reseller environment don't really spend time with their customers. I can tell you I've got 350 people worldwide. They're on the phone with customers all day long, providing them all sorts of answers to questions around their licensing type, their options, their ability to commit to long-term contracts, as well as to demonstrate to them newer technologies from our portfolio. So it's a really, really interesting way that Veeam goes about it that most of our competitors don't even reach out to their customers and support their customers in that way. So we're proactive. Obviously, our tech support is reactive, but we're proactive, if you will.
So Dave hasn't figured out how to use his mute button, so that gives me a chance to ask a question.
Yeah, I got double muted.
Oh man. So Jim,
he's 30 years in the business. He's just learning how to press the button.
He's not that technical, but he's pretty. So what are you going to do? I do have one question about that. You know, one of the things that was just so impressive with me before I joined Veeam, I was always surprised by how Veeam seemed to have like this cult-like following. You know, people just always were delighted they wanted to tell you how great Veeam was in their environment. And I didn't really understand one of the key secrets to success for that was the customer success team. And when I first joined on board, Dave and I had the chance to kind of visit with them, and they told us how, you know, right after you're there, they come in, they say, hey, let's help you with the difference between next finish, which gets the product running, right? That's great. And actually, did you know you could do this? And are you configured for that? And have you met an architect? And have you met a partner? And just how to get that value out. So you're having those ongoing conversations throughout the year, not just, hey, it's time for renewal. Hope you didn't have any problems. Yeah, right? I'm amazed by that.
Yeah, the worst thing to be is in a position where the first time the customer talked to the vendor, they bought the product, so they asked for money. And the next exact time they talk to the vendors ask for money for the renewal. That's not how we do it. There's constant communications. And I'll tell you, there's two big things that we're doing proactively. The first is what we call health checks. So we'll call up our customers and say, hey, look, let's get an engineer from Veeam online with you and your engineering team, and let's review your architecture. Let's review your implementation of Veeam, and let's provide you a check mark that from a health check standpoint, that you've passed all of the major milestones, and we can give you an idea of areas where we feel as though you should take a look at some concerns, maybe allocating more storage or splitting up your backups and so on and so forth. So we do a lot of testing at the time to ensure their RCOs, RTOs, all of the timing in terms of how to back up and how to restore were all hit, right? So we do that from the health check standpoint. It's free of charge. We do that proactively. The other is configuration reviews. And then so we'll look at your configuration and take a look at your workloads and then take a look at some of the new projects that are coming down, and we'll give you advice as to how to either redeploy or to start looking at other areas to consume the product. Again, free of charge, but it gives you kind of like a free review of your allocation of your resources in the future, and helps you with budgeting in the future as well. So those two things are being done proactively every single day with our team. There's not a time when a customer is calling us and saying, hey, I don't know anything about my license type. I'm just confused, because we've already walked them through the implementation, the onboarding, how to get really successful with usage of the product, and then ultimately the return on the investment. So we avoid a lot of the calls into tech support saying, how do I do this with this feature? It's already covered with the team proactively as you install the product originally.
I've got one even more traumatic for you. I feel like this conversation is jogging memories from my past life, but you mentioned like it's not good form to go ask someone for money, meaning buy the product, and then the next time you have a chat with them, by the way, I want some more money. The worst that actually has happened multiple times now is the market share leader back in the day, a few years ago, and they kind of come and go through their auditing practices, but I would have many people when I was an industry analyst say the first conversation I had with my new rep was to tell me that I'm being audited, that I haven't been buying licenses lately, so therefore it must mean that I'm out of compliance, and they want to do a hard audit to make sure that I am not, in breach of contract. So that's not the greatest relationship. I think everything you described, if I use one word, it would be relationship. I mean, people trust the product to work. Unfortunately, the product doesn't always work, meaning in our industry, Jason and I have done research where the number one complaint is the backup product is not backing up to meet your needs. So as we start to wind down, Jason, we should first, of course, thank Jim for joining us, but there's a couple things that we can point to. For example, we do have an event happening this week for our European colleagues. We did something, Jim, you'll recall this well, Veeam Live. It was actually global, but we're doing some subsetted activities as well with Veeam Live in Europe, EMEA, taking place. I believe it's on Thursday. Let me double check that. Yeah. That's Thursday. It is.
The non-English speakers. Yep.
Yes, that's right. It's a good point. We're going to also have specific languages as well, meaning not just in English. And Jason, maybe as we wrap up, let's hit the map one more time.
So it's the map. Sorry, I still watch Dora in my house. North Macedonia's in the house. Got Portugal, Senegal, Mexico's in. Okay. And by the way, please feel free to keep piling on. And we have more green in Europe than non-green, and we say that in more than one way. Yeah, so thank you all. And we still got to get my friends down in Joburg to sign up. I don't know why they're not watching. Mexico joined as well. Got some Georgia going on. Very good. We will, by the way, continue to update the map even after the live stream is over. So we'd love to our goal is typically try to get at least 20 countries in 20 states in along the way. But all right. Any last words of wisdom, and then we close this out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add real quick. Why renew? So why renew? You get you get your technical support, you have your license portal, and you get the updates, and you get all of the new releases for free. So I would ask you if you have any concerns about the renewal, you could always get me at jim.tedesco@veeam.com. Most customers will get a notification when it's time to renew, and then you could click on that, and then an agent will call you directly back. But in the meantime, happy to assist, and really pleased, and thank you for being customers, and thank you for your partnership and your trust in Veeam. We really do appreciate it, and we wouldn't be able to invest in the resources, in the product, in the development, in new technology if it wasn't for you, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you.
Can't think of a better way to wrap up. On behalf of Veeam, thank you for joining us. We'll see you same time next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Stay positive.